So in this video, we'll work on entering your bird observations into eBird. So I'll demonstrate a few of the key elements of entering data there. So let's get right to it. Here's a share screen for eBird. And there we are. We're on the home page of eBird. If you've logged in, you'll see your login and handle up here on the top right. And then if you're ready to submit your records, you can go over here to the main menu and click submit. That takes you to an entry, the first of the entry screens. eBird has done a good job of striking a balance between the kinds of features that birders want, an opportunity to list the birds that they see on an outing and accumulate their sightings, and balancing that against a kind of scientific approach to recording birds. We could think of it as a sampling strategy. So these initial data entry screens are about parameterizing those that sampling strategy that you use. So in that sense, sampling could be thought of as when, where, and how you're collecting your bird data. And so this is designed to get that done for you. So for the where part, they have a couple different options. I usually start with a county because that's got a nice geographical scale where I can start zeroing in on where I'm birding. But you can use longs or use an entire county, or eventually you'll have a list of your own locations that you've determined that are up here in a drop-down menu. So let's put in Thurston. There it is. And up pops a map with all the area of Thurston County and blue and red markers. So the blue markers are locations that I've set up myself. So you can see there's quite a few more up here toward where I live, up in Kitsap. Here's a funny little snake. What is this? Let me show you these two. This week, you're working on the assignment of doing a breeding bird survey route, a BBS route for point counts. Well, this is an official BBS route, one of several hundred in North America. And so these are all locations that I've put in that together constitute this 25-mile route set up by the Fish and Wildlife folks in Washington, D.C. And I carry them out, and I entered these into eBird as individual points. So if I go here, look, I even labeled it BBS route number 89, 41.1. And then this one is going to be something like 20, 12, here's 12. So there's 50 points here. And these are the routes I did over the weekend to get the data for the third year that I've been doing it. But other people have done it since the 60s. So it's a long running data set, and that's what it looks like. Note that at each of these points, there's only a 3-minute point count worth of bird data entered. So it doesn't have to be a big data set that you put in, could be a small one. Anyway, let's move up here to Olympia. So on Friday, I'm gonna meet you guys, whoever wants to come, optional, here at Marathon Park on Capitol Lake, North Capitol Lake. And so I might put in my birding location right there. Marathon Park. Let's see, let's move in. There it is. So then it comes up with a green marker to indicate where you're suggesting birding. And so then I could label that Marathon Park. But let's think for a minute. Look, the red markers are up now. Those markers indicate kind of official hotspots, official eBird hotspots. These are just places that eBird gets enough records from that they've designated it as a kind of unified place where people go birding, either because it's in park or a public access spot or a place that accumulates interesting sightings. So for whatever reason, eBirders in the past have already kind of come together to designate this as an official hotspot. So instead of starting my route at Marathon Park as a new location, I always want to check to see if there's a nearby location that captures the birding that I'm intending to do or that I've done when I'm finished. And so in this case, this hotspot, Olympia Capitol Lake North Pool, well, that pretty much covers any birds I'd see from a walk starting at Marathon Park. So I will use that one for our count on Friday. In any case, for those of you wanting to join me, there's the park. We'll meet in the parking lot there. You'll see me with binoculars. And we'll get started there at around 8. Okay. What I'm going to enter, though, is I'm going to enter a location at my home, although that gives away where I live. I don't care. That's fine. And that way I can actually enter data that I'm putting in this morning. So let's see, here's Kitsap. Here's my home range. And I live up in there. Kitsap Compound, Lambs Lane. So that's my home spot. I've now clicked that. It comes up here in chosen location. That's my birding location. So I've done the where. And I can move into the next screen of preliminary data. So date is obvious. That's today. You can just use the calendar, 24th. Then here comes observation type. This is important, and you can read more about each observation type over here in the more info if you have any questions, but I'll just go through them briefly. So if you're just standing in one spot and listening for birds, I would use stationary. Look, once you put that in, then some other drop-down questions come up about the timing and the duration. Party size refers to the number of people. If there's 3 people birding versus 1 person birding, then you're going to see more birds. So we want to know party size. That's a way to standardize for the amount of effort people are putting into being at a particular place or moving around. Historical I use sometimes when I'm putting in data from long before. eBird and eBird's way of entering data. Maybe I don't have all the details that eBird wants to capture, and so I put it in as historical. Traveling is when you're moving through an area, either by car and then stopping for birding, or birding on foot. You want to use the traveling to indicate that you're covering, in effect, a transect. You're covering an area that's not just a single point. It's an important detail about the sampling protocol. That way people can compare observations more easily from different outings and know what they're comparing. So for traveling, look, the stuff you have to enter is the duration, how long and when you started, the distance, you can choose kilometers or miles. I use kilometers. Again, the party size, and then you've got room for your checklist comments. Just to illustrate this this morning, because it's not that much different, I'm going to use incidental. I was brushing my teeth over in the bathroom, the window was open, and I noticed some birds singing out. I couldn't help but notice some birds singing out the window. And so I'll put those in. That was at 7:30, so that's the time. You can use a 24-hour clock or a 12-hour clock. That was just me, and I'll just put in while toothbrushing. This is where you can enter journal, the type of information you would enter for a field journal entry. So something about the weather, overcast, over after, very warm day, yesterday, and more details if this were an official entry. But for incidental, maybe I'll just leave it at that. Continue. Once you hit continue, then you get the species list. What did you see or hear? Gives you the details of your outing that you put in. And then there's a few options here. Well, let's just do what I heard this morning. So there was a brown creeper. Here's an entry box where you can put in the species number, and it'll scan for what's available. Brown creeper. I heard a brown creeper. I click on that. There it goes. Takes me right to the brown creeper. Put in 1. I don't even have to mention that it was heard unless that's one of the protocol elements that I want to capture. If I want to add details, I could hit the space bar. And that's the same thing as let's do this, as show details over here. Once I enter something, it gives me an option to add more information. I could put in heard only for details. You can see here breeding code. If there's breeding activity, nest with eggs, sometimes you'll find a nest. Visiting probable nest site, that's for advanced birders that can interpret behavior and figure out, oh, that's maybe that's an osprey visiting an established nest, or a woodpecker visiting a hole, a cavity where it might nest. So that you can put in that kind of detail. Here's age and sex information. So if you know more details, we'll get into that in the 3rd week. This is where you'd find that. And media. Oh, let's see. Yeah, that's all we want to. Oh, to add media, first save the checklist and then go to add media on the next page. So once you're finished with your list, then you go back and fill in the media, the pictures or the recordings that you've taken of your birds to save them. So what else did I detect this morning? I detected a hairy woodpecker. Notice I just scrolled up and down. These birds are actually listed in Clement's list taxonomic order. So that's one of the ways we're using AOS, American Ornithological Society, systematics. Here's another very similar method that Cornell uses. And so you'll see that the order is very similar to what you'll be using in your field guide or when we're talking about taxonomy. So I just have done this enough. I know where the woodpeckers are. There's the woodpeckers. I heard two Pacific slope flycatchers calling to each other. No crows, no chickadees, no swallows. I heard a red-breasted nuthatch this morning. 1, 2 Pacific wrens. This was just toothbrushing. A purple finch. Warblers, Wilson's warbler, and an orange-crowned warbler. All those were singing, and black-headed grosbeak. They're very active right now. Okay, so that's my list of birds I detected. Notice this isn't exactly how you'll be doing it on your journal entry, but this shows you how the entry process works. And then I can go here and submit. I'll do that in a second. First, I want to show you these other things. This is key right here. Are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? This is what we were talking about yesterday at the end of the class session. I was mentioning that this is part of the sampling protocol that they define. When you're working hard on getting a recording or a picture, you might not be focused so much on detecting what you can detect about birds there. So then you might say, no, I didn't really try very hard to make sure I was detecting all the birds that I could have detected. And notice that for an incidental list, by definition, it's a incomplete checklist. It's not a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify. I'm just randomly selecting those that stuck with me. I didn't make an effort to capture a sense of everything that was out there. This is just what I happened to notice. So that's an important one that you always put in. And then here's some details, show rarities. This will show you if there's a rarity that you might have detected. Let me click on that. Oh, I've done something here. Oh, I undid the subspecies. So before it was showing me subspecies entries for rarities. Click that and it'll bring up a whole suite of birds that weren't in the initial checklist that you might detect, but are perhaps very rare. For example, Baikal teal, there's maybe half a dozen records for Washington, so that would be extremely unusual. So you can see that starting with rarities is probably not a good way to detect, to figure out what you've seen here on a particular day. A couple interesting things about that. If you put in a rare species, say I put in a brant, then it'll, when I click submit, it'll require me to add some documentation, either a picture or a recording, or if none of that is available, then a detailed description, and someone will review that and check with you if there's doubt about what you've described. That's rarities. Let's get rid of that. And then, oh, see, there it goes. Whoops. See here it says, to add media, this bird is rare for this date and location. Please add comments. Check complete and any photos or sounds after submitting and saving the checklist. So there it goes. It's saying, we have some, we want some confirmation of this very unusual bird. The programming is pretty neat on these records. So it actually, the way the checklist comes up is it includes seasonal likelihoods. So on specific dates, brant, which is a winter visitor, will move from a normal part of a checklist in this area to one that is rare because they just don't stay around here in any numbers in the summer after they've migrated to the Arctic where they breed. So I'm going to remove that and it'll take it out then when I submit. I think that's all we need to work on right now. You've got the basics and we can submit that. And there it goes. That's the record accepted. It's now joined the your suite of record of outings of lists in your eBird, and here you can do kind of a final check, make sure you didn't make a mistake, and look at all the details of that entry. Then you can go back to my eBird, and over here on the right is manage my checklists, and look at that. Then the most recent observation, June 24th, 2020, 7:30, is the first checklist, and you can go back and review it and edit it and share it if necessary. So share, you're going to share it to Styringa. That will go here, and then I'll put that in. We can see what happens. And yay, this checklist has been shared. And so that's what you'll do to make sure that we see the checklist that you need to view. So at this point, you could go back and add over here on the top right, you could add media for any of those entries you put in. So here, add media. It'll call up your files and ask you to put in your files for adding media at that point. All right, I think that's all we need to do on the data entry module. The next thing will be I'll give you a chance to, I'll give you a chance to play with this, and I'll use a hand device, a phone, and show you how the app handles data entry. It's a little bit different, but the basic steps are the same. So get used to this and you'll have no problem with the handheld app. All right, I think that's all we want to do. And I can end the meeting here.